If my joy is contingent on the circumstances that give me happiness, then my joy will go up and down, up and down. But joy is a deeper thing. It does not have its source and origin in circumstances that happen to me. It has its source and origin from something within me.
Wherever you are, whichever time zone you're in, you're here now. Welcome home to the Global Joy Summit. I'm Peggy Callahan, a longtime anti-slavery activist and a producer and the co-director of the documentary Mission Joy, Finding Happiness in Troubled Times. I'm so happy to be here with the Most Reverend Bishop Michael Bruce Curry, the presiding bishop and primate of the Episcopal Church. That's a title. And you'll be as happy as I am when Bishop Curry shares his story. So get comfortable. We're in for a great conversation. A little background first, or maybe a big background. He's done a lot of stuff. Michael Curry is the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church in the United States, and he's a prophetic leader, particularly in the areas of racial reconciliation, climate change, immigration policy, marriage equality. He's even helping Congresspeople from opposing political parties get to know each other versus demonizing one another, which is all the proof I need that miracles really do happen. You may also know Bishop Curry for his electrifying sermon at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding. And he's the author of several best-selling books, including Love is the Way, Holding On to Hope in Troubling Times. There's also a documentary with Bishop Curry called A Case for Love coming out soon. I can't wait to see it. Thank you for being with us, Bishop Curry.
Oh,
Let's
Peggy,
start.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with a wide angle question. So many of us around the world are hurting these days, desperate for love and joy. What can you say to those of us who could really use some hope and joy today?
Well, that's real. I mean, what you're describing is real, I think, globally, for all of us. The pandemic, and the just kind of the crises that we're living with, kind of in the world, between nations and within nations, and the reality of climate change and its impact, and how it's impacting people's lives, on the ground, so to speak. I mean, the increase in number of refugees and people having to move around because of impacts from climate change, and then kind of the whole consciousness. And we're all kind of, I nicknamed it kind of COVIDitis. It's, it's like we're all kind of living with that, and children going back to school, and kids being behind, and it was necessary for us to have the shutdowns to save people's lives, when we didn't have vaccines and we didn't have, so it was necessary, but there was a consequence. There are consequences to that. So we're all living with that. And just the fact that for many people in the world, we were isolated from each other. We were actually separated from each other. You put all that together and you get this gestalt that's just a lot for all of us to bear. And the spiritual and emotional and mental and social impacts of that, we don't even know completely what all those are going to be. And we've seen some. And part of it comes from it's funny, if you look in the Bible, in the Hebrew scriptures, in Genesis, the first story of creation, God creates first day, second day, through 7 days. And every time God creates, in it's wonderful poetry of creation. Every time God creates, God says, or the text says, and behold, God saw that he made, and it was good. And this constant refrain, it was good. And on the seventh day, when everything is finished, behold, God said, it is very good. And it's the first negative word in the Bible comes in the next chapter, when the first human one is created. And then God says, it is not good for the human one to be alone. We were made for each other, actually. We were made for relationship with each other, with God, with all of creation. That's how we were made. I mean, that's why and when we're separated from each other, whether it's because of a pandemic when we had to be, or when we've been separated from each other because of social conditions, whether it's segregation, apartheid, or the way people are separated from each other and we don't know each other. It's not good for the human ones to be alone. So the way back is we've got to rebuild community. We've got to rebuild community so that the good energy that can be among us begins to spread. And when I'm weak, Peggy, you're strong, and you lift me up. And when you're weak, I'm strong, and I lift you up. You see what I mean? When that community functions at its best, then we have the find the capacity to discover joy anew. But you know what else? I mean, I realized this during the pandemic. This is more than you asked for, I expect. But I realized this during the pandemic. I was in a conversation with a rabbi who also I think was a therapist, is a therapist, and she said at one point, she said, think about the times when you've gone through hard times before, and in spite of the difficulty, you made it. What did you do? What did others do to help and support you? You actually have experience of making it through tough times. So draw on that prior experience. You know what I mean? Draw on what were those moments of joy and uplift? What were those reservoirs of strength? Go back, pick them up and live by them and learn from them because you have succeeded before. And don't let what comes in front of you right now pull you all the way down. Remember, you didn't get here without having made it, and you've made it. You've already succeeded. So build on that success. Build on that joy. Think about a friend of mine keep a journal, and I don't do this. I mean, I do it in my prayer time, but I don't do it writing. A friend of mine says keep a gratitude, a joy journal. And I think that's what the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu are talking about. Keep a list, track those moments of joy, those things for which I'm grateful and thankful. Keep track of them and let that positive overwhelm the negative. Let the light shine in the darkness so that the darkness cannot overcome it, like the Bible says.
Wow, that's so great. See you later.
Okay.
A little shorter than I thought it would be.
Oh, it's a great question. Oh.
That was such an all-encompassing, amazing, energizing answer. Thank you. And I'm wondering, you don't come to this wisdom and this experience overnight. How did you learn to see light despite the darkness?
Well, I mean, I guess I saw it in others through some hard times. Um, when I was a kid, and I talk about this in one of my books, but when I was a kid, in fifth grade going into sixth grade, however old you would be at that time, our mother suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage and was in a coma for another year and a half, and eventually died from it, but was in a coma for a long time. And my sister and I, there are two of us, our grandmother kind of set up her tent and moved in to help Daddy, who did not know how to cook and I'm not sure he ever learned, but we ate. She set up, and there's a little girl's hair, so Grandma, would do her hair and all that kind of stuff, and my grandmother was, she was just a remarkable. She was incredibly ordinary, extraordinary. You know what I mean? And she was, this was a woman who eventually buried her only daughter, my mother, when she died. She watched her in a coma, and she helped to take care of her children, her grandchildren. I mean, my mother's children, her grandchildren. She had already buried a husband. She had already buried two children, one who died in infancy rather, and then had two sons go off to war. This during the Second World War. Fortunately, they both came back. Um, one deeply wounded, I think, and when you look back on it. I mean, this one, then she grew up in North Carolina, in East Carolina, in the segregated South. She was a child of sharecroppers. You see the portrait I'm painting? And this woman, I mean, she was a vibrant, you know, just a remarkable person who just kept smiling and kept living, and there was a sense of inner something. Now I know where she got it. I mean, Grandma. I mean, I'm an Episcopalian, but Grandma was a dyed-in-the-wool Rock Red Baptist, and Grandma used to love to go to church. And if you know anything about the Black Baptist Church, certainly in the South, but go back years. I mean, these were folk. I mean, my grandmother was a domestic worker. She cleaned folks' houses and got her three surviving children through college. She
Whoa.
and my grandfather, they worked on the railroad, so they did it together. But it was it was just remarkable. And but I remember going to church with her when we were little kids, and we'd be at grounds, we'd go to church, and and folk would shout when something good was happening, and you could just see and grandma wasn't a shouter. I mean, she wasn't one of the ones, shouting amen or glory, hallelujah. She wasn't one of them, but she seemed to get off on watching other people shout. I mean, I mean, when you never, she's not around for me to ask her now, but somehow she enjoyed, she was lifted up by the energy of people whose lives had probably all been pretty tough when I think about them now during the week, and who were going to another week of tough living. But there was something about that church moment when the preacher got to preaching and the choir got to singing. It was like a spirit from another world, a transcendent reality became a reality in their midst and said, "You are mine. You are my beloved. You are my child. Lift yourself up. Lift up your head, ye mighty gates." That kind of, when they got that energy, grandma was just as happy as she could be. Like folks used to say, she got happy. She didn't shout, but she sure did enjoy watching other people shout and get happy. And she fed off of it. It was enough for another week. And when I look back, it occurs to me that she was in touch with an energy and a power we call the spirit, we call God. I mean, there may be a number of names but that energy is the same creative energy that created the world in the first place, that has given every one of us the breath of life. And Peggy, she got in touch with that. And that's what was going on that Sunday morning. And that was enough to get her through the week and to bury two children in, infancy, and then her only girl. I mean, her only girl child. And to survive with two sons in a war in a segregated military.
Whoa.
Anyway, it's just like you put all this together, and I mean, she's my hero. And that, I think I've seen it in her. I saw it in her, and there are other people like her. I mean, my grandmother may not be unique. There are people around us who just have that inner something that I think comes from being connected to the energy of love and life and goodness and compassion. And that energy, that source, I call God.
Wow. Wow. Now, I'm starting to feel that every time you open your mouth, it's going to be so great.
Oh, you're
And
kind.
that could be the whole interview all by itself, but that doesn't mean to say I'm going to let you go.
Oh, okay. I thought you let me off the hook.
So you're not getting off easy. So, not to be obtuse, but you went through so much pain with your mom, and you recognized so much good in your grandma and in your church community. But for those people who don't have your grandma, who don't have that community, um, what can we say for them so because I don't want people to be saying, "Oh, of course it works for him. He's a spiritual leader."
Right, right, right. I'm supposed
What
to.
are the tools? What would you say to them?
You know what? Seek out sources of goodness. Seek them out. And by that I mean clearly there are books and groups and opportunities like this that really bring together the good energies, the good spirit, God's love and light, all of that bring those together. And then seek out those sources. I mean, and find them. And then in addition, find people, communities of people. I mean, I really do think we need, I call healthy, loving, liberating, and life-giving communities, and to find those communities and dwell there. I mean, I'm kind of, I grew up with folks saying you got to go to church. Well, I think, yeah, you do. I mean, go to church, go to synagogue, go to mosque, you got to find your religious community. But I think what's behind that, what's really going on is find those communities where the source of life and love, the energy of God is present in community, and dwell there and live life coming in touch constantly with that community and its rhythm. The truth is there is wisdom that has been time tested from ancient folk who are older than my grandmother. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure she'd be happy to know that. But a lot of the folk in our scriptures, I mean, there's some wisdom that's actually already been beta tested. I mean, I jokingly say, but I'm actually serious with folk in church. I say, Moses already time tested meditation. Guess what? That's what Moses was doing on Mount Sinai. Next thing he knew, he was helping to set folk free. I mean, it's already been beta tested. We don't need to retest it. Ways of meditation and coming in contact with God, with what Paul Tillich used to call the ground of our being. I mean, the source of it all. It's real. I mean, Moses came in contact with him. Queen Esther, you read the story of Queen Esther in the Bible, in times when she was facing genocide. And she came in touch with it and realized, I got to take courage, and found courage to save people's lives. I mean, you go through all of our religious traditions at their very best. You see these people who come in contact with the source of goodness and life and love, the God who the New Testament says is love. That reality, and we gather in communities to come in touch with that reality. Jesus of Nazareth once said, wherever two or three gather together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. That notion that when community gathers, the reality of God who made us all, the reality of the energies of love and life are somehow present when we gather in that name, in the name of what is good and just and kind and loving and joyful.
Thank you. Wow. Some of us struggle a bit with understanding or dealing with the fact that joy and sorrow exist at the same time.
Yeah.
That they're
Yeah.
inseparable,
Yeah.
and it's not all bright. It's not all deeply sorrowful, but they're a package deal.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
Can
right.
you talk to us about that?
Yeah. There's an old spiritual of enslaved Africans in our country that goes. I won't sing it because that would not be joyful for you to hear me singing. But it's the one that goes. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my trouble. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. And then it says, "Glory, hallelujah." And when you think about what's going on in that pattern, one of the verses says, "Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah." Think of the trajectory. There's an affirmation, a recognition that something's hard and something hurts. So we're not talking about ignoring or pretending that something doesn't hurt. Some stuff hurts, and there's parts of life that hurt. That is real. Name it. Name it. Don't let it stay subterranean, because when it's subterranean, it can control you. No, no, no. You got to manage that thing and naming it. So nobody knows the trouble I've seen. So the slave instinctively knew they had to name the trouble. They had to name it. Nobody knows. And then when that second verse that said nobody knows but Jesus, there you see them going back to the source of life and love and justice and compassion and mercy. Go back to that source regardless of the social conditions that are around them. And then working through that, eventually you get to glory, hallelujah. I think that's what my grandma did. Start with trouble and get the glory. And again, I know I keep talking about religious community, and spiritual practices, as ways to this, but I do think they help with the transition. They help us move through that. Good therapy helps us move through that. I mean, you see what I'm saying? We've got resources that can help us, as Harry Emerson Fosdick used to say, for the living of these days. His great hymn, God of Grace and God of Glory, has that refrain: grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the living of these days. And I think those resources that are there can help us move from trouble to glory, even in the midst of troubling times.
Wow. Wow. You must be a preacher or something.
Yeah, yeah, but they pay me to do it. Yeah, it's probably something very simple to get paid to do what you love to do. Yeah, it's really probably something wrong with that, but I'll leave it as it is.
So, um, you've had a rich life, a lot of time to experience life and experience difficult days and glorious days. And so, at this time in your life, what gives you joy? What just rocks your world these days?
Hmm. Well, now this is a silly answer. I'll get to a serious one in a second. You may not be able to tell, but as my Buffalo Bills helmet. I grew up in Buffalo, so I'm a lifelong Buffalo Bills fan, and they happen to be winning at the moment. Um, so that gives me some happiness. But I have to admit, I'm learning that there's a difference between happiness and joy. That happiness, I'm happy that the Bills are winning, um, but they could be losing. You know what I mean? Tomorrow. So if my joy is contingent on the circumstances that give me happiness, then my joy will go up and down, up and down. It's controlled by what happens beyond me, and happiness is like that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not putting it. It's like that. We got to have some happy moments, but joy is a deeper thing. It comes from some deeper. It is not controlled. It does not have its source and origin in circumstances that happen to me. It has its source and origin from something within me that wells up and becomes a part of my life. There's no song that says something within me that holdeth the reins, something within me I cannot explain. All that I know, there is something within. It's that something within. And I can tell you that even in hard times, and I've had hard times, as an adult. I mean, like Langston Hughes' poem "From Mother to Son," where the refrain, the mother says to the son, "Life for me ain't been no crystal stairway." And there's some truth in that. My life has not been as hard as some, but I'm a cancer survivor, colon cancer, cancer. I had a subdural hematoma when I hit my head, trying to be cute, running across the street, and fell and hit my head, and about a month later was actually preaching in a church when I couldn't remember what I was talking about. And again, with subdural hematomas, there's they had to evacuate the blood and all that kind of stuff. But Next thing I know, I found myself in an ambulance going, and the EMT was saying, "Now, Michael, you got to stay awake. Don't go to sleep on me. Stay awake." I said, "Oh, I just want to sleep a little bit." She said, "Stay awake." I said, "Oh, okay, I'll stay awake." And next thing I knew, I was in surgery. Um, and when I came out, I could talk. I did have to relearn how to walk, and I couldn't sign my name yet. I couldn't sign my now again with that kind of subdural hematoma, you do recover. It just takes a while. And I ended up going to physical and occupational therapy to learn. I mean, there were, and what I remember profoundly is I had to do some things that are related to my office as a presiding bishop. I mean, I had to basically represent the Episcopal Church when we had opened marriage to all who seek to be married in the church and are willing to take the vows of commitment to each other and the vows that are part of marriage, whether they are same sex or differently sex. That all of God's children who want to take that step in life, we're gonna. So I had to go and answer that with a brain that was probably working at 50%. And Peggy, I, I mean, I could not walk through an airport on my own because there was too much data coming in, and the physical therapist helped me figure it out. I said, well, you need to have a staff person walk with you. Literally, I had to put my hand on the arm of a staff person to walk through Kennedy Airport and then walk through Heathrow Airport. Those are big airports and they're complex, and we don't normally pay attention to all the data that's coming in. But I got to tell you, I knew through that time that there were people praying, that they really were praying. And and I know that prayer gets received by God and disperses. It's like God disperses good energy into the world, and how that works out. I don't pretend to know exactly how it all works out. All I know is something good. And I knew folk, and I got through that and was able to speak and articulate and to engage in conversation still in physical and occupational therapy, not being able to write my name yet. Now I can do it now, but I couldn't even sign my name. Now I'm telling you, that may not be the same as the Valley of the Shadow of Death for some folk, but it was a tough time. And there have been times when I've taken positions that were not popular, and that were not accepted by everyone. And I got to tell you, it was hard sometimes. It is hard sometimes. There's no way around that. And yet, I know that I'd rather do that and be congruent with what I really believe and hope is the case than to live a lie. That's harder. That's not We weren't made to live lies. That's why we're just not made for that. And I mean, I remember telling somebody, I said, it hurts to get criticized, and it does. It's not fun. But it hurts more and deeper to live a lie. That you it just does. So it's like, do the calculus, do the math. Which one you gonna do? It's almost like and it just helps to be able to talk that through with some folk. Being an extrovert, I'll talk it out with somebody and listen and get. But that it's hard, and life for so many folk is hard. I've been to the border of our country, and the dear people. I mean, they're mothers and families with children. They just want to live. They just want their children to have. I'm not talking about people who are criminals or something. I'm talking about families. I, you know, there are people who are fleeing difficult circumstances and situations and just want their children to be able to have. Um, you know, it's a hard time for the world, and we cannot capitulate. We must not capitulate to the negative, because that just drags us down further. And we've got to claim positive doesn't sound like a strong enough word. We've got to claim the light in the midst of darkness and claim the light until the light shines enough and the darkness does not overcome it. And we can do it. We can do it. Human beings have done it before, and we can do it again. We have made progress as human beings, and we have been backpedaled too. I know that. um but the fact that we have, it's kind of like my rabbi friend said, think back on the times when you survived. Kind of like Gloria Gaynor. When did Gloria Gaynor used to say, I will survive, I will survive? Think back on time.
Love that song.
I know it's a great song. Think of those times when you did, or when you saw somebody who did and learned something from them, even if it wasn't you. Think about that. Means it can be done. You see what I'm saying? It can be done against invisible. I was in Atlanta uh, a couple weeks ago, for it was the celebration of Archbishop Tutu's birthday, and it was just fascinating to be able to be there. And Ambassador Andrew Young was part of it, and all sorts of folk who've been friends, were friends of the Archbishop, and we were all there just kind of celebrating his birthday, but also recommitting ourselves to the work of helping to create a just and humane and loving world, in all of our countries. That this was a man who was joyful. I mean, he and the Dalai Lama, they blow my mind. Those dudes have faced the most incredible tyrannies and did it with joy. I mean, my favorite picture of Martin Luther King is one with him and Harry Belafonte. And I don't know what they were talking about. Either they were told a joke, they were laughing. I mean, belly laughs. I mean, there was a sense of real joy. And God knows what they were facing and dealing with around them. But that sense of joy, I mean, you see it in the Dalai Lama. You saw it in Archbishop Tutu. I mean, they did laugh. You sometimes you do have to be with folk who make you laugh. Even, I mean, sometimes when you want to cry, go on and laugh. Find something that I don't know, brings a moment of happiness, a moment of reminder that life, where there is true life, there is light. There is light. That life itself is actually life piercing the darkness. I used to go when I was a parish priest in Baltimore, Maryland. I don't remember what your original question was, Peggy, but
It doesn't matter.
it's
Me
okay.
either.
I, I used to go in when I was a parish priest in Baltimore. I'd go in Sinai Hospital there, and on the obstetrics floor where the babies were, um, there was a quote, and I can't remember if it's from the Talmud or where, but anyway, it was a quote on the wall, that said, "Every child who is born is a reminder that God is not finished with the world yet. Life itself is light shining in the darkness." Um,
You know what? My head is just with all these ideas that you're bringing up for me, and that Arch actually helped us with our anti-slavery work for 20 years. I mean, he was just such a committed person, and I was telling some of my colleagues that you remind me of this other bishop type that I love.
oh,
And it's just not because you guys wear the same color shirt. Uh,
yeah, we do. Yeah, that's right.
but you have that joy. And you have that joy and that sense of alignment, that what you see is what you get.
Yeah,
And you're not going to waste time hiding behind things that aren't
yeah.
true. And you're willing to take really tough stands. I started crying when I read your book about standing for equal marriage. I was like, you could take an easy way out of that one if you wanted to, but you couldn't, because you're in alignment. You're in like the slipstream of good.
Oh wow, that's a slipstream. Yeah.
right? And we know when we're in the slipstream of good. And I think you live there from what I've read and seen in this massive, long, hours long conversation that's happening in 20 minutes. Um,
Well, yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Laughing is a lot. Yeah.
it's amazing, and you do that. And Arch used to say that for those of us who are activists and trying to make big change and kind of knocking your head against the wall a lot of times, that you got to have fun while you're doing it. You got
Gotta
to
have
look
fun.
like you're enjoying it because you need a lot of help. Nobody's going to help people who aren't any fun.
No, exactly. Exactly. It's true. Oh gosh. I mean, the times I was with him over the years, I mean, I can't think of a time. I'm trying to think of a time being with him when something didn't happen or something wasn't said that he laughed at. I mean, I don't mean laugh at people, but I mean laughed where there was, I, and you laughed when he laughed. You laughed. I mean,
You have to, right?
you just did. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and sometimes there are it takes others who help us laugh, help us find that joy. And that's okay. That's but we do, I mean, I'm sure you can't tell from reading religious text because in the cultural time that most of them written, the notion of laughter is a little different than it is now for us. But they had to laugh. I am convinced that the story of Jonah in the Hebrew scriptures about Jonah and the whale and all that kind of, when you read that, imagine a stand up doing that, telling that story. That's how I think that story came. Because I got a feeling, because it is funny. I mean, there's parts of it that are actually, when you think about it, wait a minute. Okay, I mean, the guy gets swallowed by this great fish, and then he gets spit up, or the fish vomits, and then he gets spit up, and we're not supposed to giggle at this. I mean, when you stop and think about it, and I wonder about because we've got religious figures frozen in stained glass, so they're all. I got a funny feeling the Dalai Lama and the Arch are more reflective of what they were really like than the stained glass sometimes image. Um, I think I got a feeling Jesus had a pretty good sense of humor.
A whale and Jonah walked into the bar.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
uh, wow, I just so enjoyed talking to you. Now, Arch went to the seminary because of the Bantu laws that prevented that teachers could only teach black folk ways to serve white folk. And he said, I'm out, I'm done. And he went to seminary. That's a pretty extreme way uh, to go to a seminary and to devote your life to God. What was it that put you on that path?
Well, my father was an Episcopal priest, so that the possibility. Although when you're a kid, when you're a little kid, you want to be like daddy or mommy, that kind of thing. And then as you become a teenager, you want to do whatever the opposite of mommy and daddy. You sort of find anything else. But I have to admit that I did grow up in a context where um, serving was just the way. I remember a conversation with my father. I was probably 12 or 13, and I don't remember what he wanted me to do, but whatever it was, I didn't want to do it. Now, I didn't say anything because in those days, children didn't express what they were really thinking uh, to adults. You just didn't go there. So I didn't say it, but apparently my face, something gave him a signal that I didn't want to do it. And he just kind of blurted out, he said, the Lord didn't put you here just to consume oxygen. Um, and, and, again, probably not a considered theological or philosophical point. It was a parental reaction, but he was on to something. And we grew up with him, especially but even my mother, while she was living, um, they were just committed to all sorts of work of social justice and that kind of stuff. He was involved in desegregation work in Buffalo when we were living there. He and my mother met at Wilberforce University, where she was teaching, and he was in the seminary there. And she was there because she was a mathematician, and she was committed to. I mean, she didn't have any other option in those days, really. But she was committed to teaching in math in an HBCU, and then later was teaching it in Buffalo when we were in Buffalo when we moved. I mean, they had a commitment that you're supposed to do something on this earth beside just consume. Maybe you need to consume oxygen too, but you also give off carbon dioxide, which actually there's an ecological thing going on there. The plants get what they need from us, and they give us what we need, which is why anyway. Climate change, environment matters. We're all interconnected. Um, we, whether we like it or not, we are.
We live
But
together and we die together.
that's right. So having grown up with that, it was just a given. The question was, what was I going to do? And he never told us what to do, but you got to do something. And whatever you do, you got to make a qualitative difference because you were here. Something's got to be better because you passed along this way. I mean, he didn't say all of that stuff, but that was the messages that I got. And so when I went to college, I was thinking about, what do you do? Maybe public service, maybe run for political office. You go to law school and then you come back out and you get a job and then you do that. That was one trajectory that I played with. And then I had a teacher in college who I was taking. I forgot the course title, but there was a section where we could do some optional reading and then do independent study. It was part of the course, and he encouraged me to actually study some of the writings of King, not just listen to his sermons. I mean, not. He said, get beyond, the March on Washington. What did he write? What's going on? There's a thought. There's thought there. And when I started doing that, that's when I began to realize that maybe the ministry for me was. It became a live possibility again. And one thing led to another, and I trust the Lord had something to do with it. Um, Otherwise, I've been spent 40 years doing this, so hopefully the Lord has something to do with it. but,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, we'll know when we get there, but hopefully, and so that's where,
But
and
as
I
my Dalai Lama would say, you go first and let me know how it is.
let me know how it is. Right, exactly, exactly.
How's that working for you?
Yes, it's true.
Wow. Wow.
Oh,
Um, wow. I, I think we probably both got the same message that service is the rent you pay on earth, right?
yep,
And it
you
doesn't
got it.
take long to figure out that the minute you're being of service to someone else, the first person you help is yourself because it
I'm
feels
helping you.
so good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, Peggy. It really is true. And I do believe. Can I? This I don't mean serving. Whatever words are right. Serving something beyond self. I mean, you got to take care of yourself too. I mean, it's not an either or. Um, but living for serving others, there's a deep inner joy there, source of joy there, because I think in genuinely serving, this isn't the right word. I want to say mimicking. I don't mean mimicking, but we're aligning ourselves with with God, who didn't have to create the world but did. Because if God is love, as I believe God is, love makes room and space for others to be. Love is not selfish and no, love makes room, and that's what God does. And next thing you know, there's a world, and next thing you know, there's Peggy, there's Michael, there's the Dalai Lama, there's the Arch, And there's every little baby who has ever cried on the face of this earth.
Okay, I know I have to let you go, even though I really don't want to. I'm being quite selfish.
Oh,
Um,
I'm enjoying talking to you.
this this last question: in these troubled, and beautiful times, what do you hope and dream and pray for?
That we would learn to love each other. That simple. I hope and pray and long for us to love each other for real across all of our differences, across all of our wondrous diversity and variety, that we learn to love each other. And that love becomes the law of our hearts and our lives and our societies and our global community. And when that happens, no child will go to bed hungry. And when that happens, as the old African slaves used to say, we'll learn to lay down our swords and shields down by the riverside and study war no more.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you.
Thank you for all you've done, all you will do to make this world more loving and more joy filled. And I can't wait to see your documentary.
Yeah, me too. I'm a little nervous, but anyway, I can't wait to see it. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. God bless you.
Oh, no, bless you.
Thank you.